I thought I had pressed the go live button on it.
It says it's live now.
Yeah. Okay. That is so weird. I pressed the go live button, and then and then the panel that says go live disappeared, and there was a go live button again. Hey, welcome everybody to Talking Niagara this morning. It's the 7th of July, and Dave's going to grab his coffee by the looks of it.
But yeah, I'm just going to wait. I'm just listening to the percolator going there. As soon as it's done,
I got mine. I got mine ready, but it's not coffee.
Tea, I would imagine.
Not tea. I don't drink tea. This is a fruit. This is a juice that's made up. It's a homemade juice that I've got, which is made up of mango, passion, and cider vinegar, and honey. Oh, and a bit of lemon.
Don't forget the gin.
Not this time in the morning, thank you. All right. Anyway, so that's where we are. Okay, so welcome everybody to Talking Niagara. Looks like Russia and Ukraine were trading drone strikes the weekend.
Oh, it's sickening. That thing keeps going on and on. Well, the mighty, the supreme leader just south of our border there insisted that he could fix the war within one day. He's nowhere close to it right now. He berated, him and Vance berated Zelensky mercifully in the Oval Office.
Yeah.
And just come out looking ignorant, both of them, and Rubio as well. They were trying to put the pressure on Zelensky so that they could make a deal with Russia. That they were just being played by Putin. And Putin is still playing the supreme leader of the United States. So that has not come to an end. Trump's promise to bring that to an end, it did not work. It was just a lie that he could do it. Same as Gaza. Just another way of trying to get votes. But the big problem here is that China has officially said that it is in China's interest that Russia lose that war. They don't want that war lost. The underlying message there is, as long as the United States and Europe are engaged in Russia and the Ukraine, that is less resources they can put towards what's happening in China right now. And of course, Xi Jinping has promised that he would invade Taiwan by 2027. They have prepared enormous amounts of naval capacity and landing craft, specialized landing craft for that job. Unless the West, particularly the United States, has enough resources to make that invasion less likely, then it's in China's interest that these entanglements the United States is in continue. We even find that the Houthis are now resuming their bombing campaigns, their missile campaigns against ships. They've started that again in the Red Sea. So although the Ukrainians have come up with a spectacular attack a few weeks ago against Russian assets way into Siberia, I think it was, what they did was they clandestinely put shipping containers with drones in them. They established a particular person as a trucker in Russia, and they would send trucks everywhere, here and there, as you might expect. Yeah. They sent one close to the Air Force base, way in the near isolated part of Russia, and these shipping containers opened up and drones came out of them and took out about 40 Russian high-end Russian bombers which was a big attack and degraded Russia's ability to actually have their Air Force drop bombs on Ukraine. Russia is in full war mode now, and are
not surprised really.
But it's not only that, they're building up assets everywhere else within the country. I don't know where they're getting the people for this, but they're building up military assets.
Remember last year they were talking about this time last year, maybe a bit later last year. They were talking about putting North Korean troops into.
They have them. They have them there.
Yeah,
they have them there, and about another 10,000 are coming, evidently. On the Ukrainian side, however, they have a limited amount of manpower.
Yeah, so them putting actually North Korean troops on there means that their boys can fall back a while, take command rather than be in the front line.
Well, despite the fact that Ukraine and Russia are two very corrupt countries, this has to end. It's not just the fact that there's a bloodbath that really needlessly happening and continuing. It's drawing too much of the world's resources away. Like Europe could have had cheap Russian gas. The Nord 2 pipeline was blown up. Unfortunately for Ukraine, Biden did not issue enough weapons to make a difference. He was very, very careful. He only gave out little bits of it in order to keep the war going. But now Russia's got a decided advantage because they have a bigger country.
And they have good manufacturing facilities, yeah.
Well, it's not only that, but they have the manufacturing facilities that are in Iran. They're buying enormous amounts of drones from Iran. The last Russian attack were a lot of dummy drones that came over to use up the anti-aircraft capabilities.
Whatever type of drone you're sending over, if you send a decoy that you're prepared to get rid of, that doesn't have huge stocks of armaments in it, that certainly takes away the defenses, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Defenses don't know whether it's real or not.
My percolator ended, so I'm going to be right back.
All right. Yeah. Okay. So, that's, and they're also, Ukraine is now seeking to ramp up any drone production that they can do. But they're like inking deals with their European allies and certain US defense companies in order to bolster their defenses. All right. So that's what Zelensky is saying anyway. Right. And one of the things that also Zelensky was saying is important and productive, that he's had a lot of phone calls with people like Donald Trump. I don't know about Donald Trump him having productive calls with Donald Trump. I was a long way from it last year, earlier in the year when he met.
Yeah. Now Trump's had a phone call with Putin, and he said it didn't go well. He says he was very, very, very disappointed in his phone call. But what's he going to be able to do? But then on the same hand, he stopped shipments of military equipment to Ukraine. What's that supposed to do? Is that supposed to entice Russia into calling a ceasefire? China has stepped in, as I said before, and said it is not their interest that Russia loses this war.
Yeah. In fact, it wants the diversion, irrespective of whether Russia wins or loses. It wants us to be diverted away from its Pacific activities.
Yeah. Although officially it says it wants a ceasefire declared. As long as China itself is not being affected monetarily or export, but we'll have to find out here because it's just this war is just going on and on, and until I don't think this war is going to end until somebody assassinates Vladimir Putin.
Yeah, but again, that has been one of the things that has been tried, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has, but it's kind of like the Gaza thing too. Netanyahu won't let it end because he has to face the electorate if there's peace.
Yeah.
So he doesn't want that to end. He's staved off elections. And what is common about both, and I mentioned this the other day, is the U.S. was crawling all over Zelensky, wanting him to face an electorate, hoping to support an opponent that would be more malleable to them, someone who would do their bidding, and said that there was not a democracy there. But at the very same time, elections were suspended in Israel as the Gaza war continues. So what is it, United States? But then you've got nothing to say about that. Yeah. Why is that?
Yeah. Yeah. Inconsistencies there. Okay, a couple of comments. Good morning, Mike. And they have just ordered more troops from North Korea and are going to use them to get more land from Ukraine. Yeah, the North Koreans are actually the ones battling on the ground now, with the Russians basically stepping back so that they don't lose troops.
Yes. I was just going to say what the temperatures are going to be like today. They're not going over 28, so it's not going to be a bad day out there.
Yeah, I hope it settles down today. I hope it's not. It was ridiculous yesterday.
And thunderstorms are possible right after 9 o'clock today.
Oh, I believe as I heard that thunderstorms were happening tomorrow. Were expected tomorrow. Okay,
but at night it's going to be a nice one. Turn off your air conditioners, everyone, because it's going down to 17 tonight. That's really nice. You open up your windows and let that cool air, fresh air come in. That'll make you sleep better.
Well, it's going down to 19 or 18 all week this week at the lows at night.
That's beautiful.
Yeah,
that's beautiful. You cool down. I do that when it's like last night. I didn't do it because it was a little warm still out there, but almost every night so far I've been opening up the windows because the temperatures have gone down. I cool down my place, and then I shut everything up, and then I turn back on the air conditioner, set at 75, and it only goes off 1 or 2 times during the afternoon.
Right, Mike asked the question: why are they not punishing North Korea for this?
Well, you don't want to bring that in. North Korea is a client state of China, so you don't want to mess with that. Yeah. Now, I wouldn't doubt for 1 minute that China said to North Korea, "We can't send troops in there. It looks bad, but you can." Yeah, you know what I mean. And so North Korea, plus the North Koreans are very aware that they have a huge army that has had no field experience.
Exactly. That's exactly what I'm thinking. North Korea needs field experience. And they've got none, right?
Yes.
They've got none since the 50s, since the Korea War ended. They've been at ceasefire since then. And they love to make these, big, bold gestures about firing missiles, but they've got no real troops that have got any experience whatsoever.
Almost all their troops are there to maintain the power of the supreme leader. The supreme leader in this case being Kim Jong-un, not Donald Trump. Donald Trump is the supreme leader of the United States. Yeah.
All right.
He loves Kim Jong. Kim Jong's surrounded by a lot of sycophants that bow to him.
I think
Donald Trump wants to be the same. He's got the Republican Party bowing to him.
I think he would love him if he would allow him to build a Trump Tower in Pyongyang. I think it's called.
Yeah. Well, he may have, but they're getting together amounted to a whole lot of nothing, but it may have quieted things a little bit. And in any case, North Korea is sending the troops there. They can do whatever they want, to answer Mike's question. Like the United States sent troops to Iraq. They sent troops to Afghanistan. Canada sent troops to Afghanistan because that's where Al Qaeda was when they planned the attack on the United States. So that invoked Article 5. The only time Article 5 has ever been used, by the way, was in support of the United States after they were attacked on 9/11.
Yeah. Okay. Moving on. Police have cracked down on Kenyan protesters. I gave you this one because basically there seems to be a wall of stuff. Kenyan protesters, about a year ago, they protested some anti-tax protests about a year ago, and now they've and there was about 60 deaths back then. Now there was a new protest on the streets of Nairobi, protesting about the deaths.
Yes, and so a year ago, the Kenyan president, the Kenyan government announced a huge increases in taxes, and this was a great burden on the people who live there, the Kenyans. But it wasn't just the taxes they were against. They were protesting the African disease. The African disease is corruption. And I get this. And I get
it's been a big problem in Kenya for a long, long time.
Well, they call it the African disease. And it was a Kenyan that I saw say that. It was a Kenyan in parliament who, in fact, I think I brought it up on this show, that the Kenyan in parliament talked about the African disease, how just about every African country is encumbered by incredible corruption. And this is due basically because families and clans and tribes are the ones that...
Well, you can get you can get away with murder. It's how much money you're prepared to pay to do it.
Yes. But it's more than that. It's the resources of the government going into individuals' hands. And I remember when I was in Ghana, now this is Africa wide. So you think, well, you shouldn't be classifying all Africa because there's 54 countries or 50 some countries in Africa. Yeah. How can you say they're all the same? Well, we find that same level of corruption just about everywhere in Africa, at least south of the Sahara and sub-Saharan Africa.
Well, I think you find some in Northern Africa as well.
Well, probably, but when you get away from the Islamic, Arab and Berber, Egypt, that kind of area. They would have their own sources of corruption, but it is a real killer to the Africans. Every country seems to be encumbered with deadly corruption.
Yeah.
As soon as a party gets into power, then they start feeding their friends and relatives sweet jobs. And I'll tell you a quick story of when I was in Ghana. I went to a resort there, and from there we went out to do some deep sea fishing, which didn't really get us anything. But anyway, we stayed in a very luxurious hotel. It was me, my cousin's husband, and a friend of his. So we had a wonderful time there, and it was inexpensive, and it was a huge, luxurious resort, and it belonged to the Ministry of Forestry, the guy with the Ministry of Forestry, right? Now his salary was about equivalent to 55,000 Canadian a year. So how could he afford this massive resort? Well, it was graft and money pulled out of the government. And you would think that the people there would hate him for doing that. No, the people in and around there, when we talked to them, didn't hate him. They liked him. And the reason why they liked him is because he took the money that he got through corruption and reinvested it in Ghana. What happens most of the time is the politicians get their money and run to Europe or other places and put their money there. Yeah. But the reason this guy was well liked is because although he got the money by graft, because everybody expects that, he actually took the money and reinvested it in his own country. Oddly enough, that was enough to give him a little bit of a hero status.
Well, last year's protest was subsided after a week when Kenyan President William Ruto withdrew his proposed tax hikes. So this week, of course, this year, it was about the people protesting the deaths. That, of course, doesn't go away.
Yeah, so it was the protests happened last year, about a week or two, until the president withdrew the punishing taxes. The problem is the government doesn't have enough money to pay for its debts or infrastructure.
Yeah,
but the people know that a large sum of that raise in taxes is going to go out there for graft
pockets. Yeah.
And so the frustration of the people because that was a very burdensome tax for the average person to pay.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Remember also that Kenya is a young country. The median age is only 19 years old. And you're going to have a lot of young people, a lot of very young, angry people who do not see themselves having a future if they're burdened with heavy taxes and a corrupt government. Where are they going to go? I think it was 40% of the population was struggling on poverty level, 40%, somewhere in that article, and that will grow with a heavy.
You're probably
tax.
right. I don't recall that. Yeah.
I think I came up with that somewhere else when I was doing my
40% of the population lives in poverty. You're right. Median. I didn't know the median age was as low as 19. That's really low.
That's quite low.
Yeah.
And you could compare it to countries like Iran, who has a very low medium age as well. So you find this problem, and the problem is young people, no future, poverty, no look at a way through it. And then the government comes along and dumps more taxes on it. More taxes on it when they look at the government and know that there is massive corruption and wealthy people here and there.
Yeah.
In the government.
One of the problems I know about Kenya from first experience, there's no you don't tax people at the municipal level. There's nothing like waste disposal. There's the water and sewage facilities are ancient, right, and built by the British or maybe even the Portuguese. That's how old they are. So
I doubt they go back to the Portuguese, but
no, I'm being cynical. but they've been a lot. They're ancient systems that really need replacing. And those municipalities don't collect. There's no collection of taxes for local municipalities.
Well, look at also what is the demographics.
Yeah.
What are the different because these are artificial countries formed by the British or other colonial powers.
Oh yeah. Well, so there's a massive.
What is the tribal mix or the national mix in Kenya?
There's a massive difference between the people on the coast in Mombasa area and the people in Nairobi. Nairobi's is a completely different country.
Well, that's part of the problem, wouldn't it be?
Yeah, absolutely.
You're trying to mix people who would otherwise have been independent from one another.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Like the same thing in Iraq. I mean, in Iraq, you've got Kurds, you've got Shias, and you've got Sunni Arab or Shia Arabs, which is Shia Arabs in the south. You got Sunni Arabs in the middle, and you've got Kurds in the north, in the same country. All three different groups would normally have their own little country, but the colonizers put them all together so they could put one against the other if they needed to.
Yeah.
Divide and conquer. In any case, the we like to put out something there internationally for everyone, because the world, we tend to be very egocentric in the West, particularly in North America. So it's good to, and why would this concern us? When people say, well, why do I care what's going on over there? Because any kind of unrest anywhere in the world could lead to longer and wars. It could lead to war. It could lead to economic disruption. Peace means money. Peace means affluence. If you have peace and you have normal trading partnerships and everything, that is good. But as soon as you get war and disruption and things like that, well, you don't realize it. But our government and all other governments have to put money into trying to keep that quiet.
Yeah, and you touched on it very clearly there. There are more than 20 tribes in Kenya, the primary ones being the Luo and the Kikuyu. But on the coast, for example, the Swahili people are a way larger. Swahili and immigrant people from India are way larger than they are in many of the other areas. Maasai are a primarily rural tribe, which many people know about because they're tall and they love to jump.
Well, which ones were the Mau Maus?
Mau Maus is actually a collection, primarily Luo and Kikuyu, and other peoples from the central parts of Kenya.
They're the ones who revolted. Yeah, you talk about, look, this is a good aside, because we talk about how Hamas viciously attacked the Israelis, and yet the Mau Maus viciously attacked the Brits back in the 50s. There was lots of atrocities by the Mau Maus against the Brits. And why was that? Is because the British were
in control.
Control and oppressing them.
Yeah.
That's how people react. People don't understand that. That's how people react. When they are oppressed, they will murder. When the oppressors oppress, they will murder. Then the oppressors will murder back. That's exactly what's happening in Gaza, and it was predicted in 1967 by these Israeli intellectuals. I posted that, what they put in Haaretz paper back then, where they predicted, once you become an oppressor, once you murder and become an oppressor, then the oppressed will murder you, and then you will be forced to murder them, and then they will be forced to murder you. That's human nature.
Yeah, it's an endless cycle, right?
So you saw what happened with the Mau Maus, exactly the same. Well, the individual indigenous people of the United States and Canada, what did they do when they fought back? They would fight back and massacre white populations, right?
Yeah.
Because they were fighting back. That's just human nature. It's not good. It's not right. It's foolish, but that's how people react, unfortunately.
Yeah. And basically, the difference between the up country in Nairobi area that is primarily Luo and Kikuyu, whereas on the coast it's Swahili and Taita that are primarily the primary people. And you're right, there's a lot of difference between those people.
Yes. And it's hard to coordinate these old colonial countries that carved up the country and put natural enemies together sometimes.
Well, if Africa were to have developed the same way Europe had developed over thousands of years, the shape of the nations in Africa today would be entirely different than the shape was enforced by European colonialists.
Yeah, well, they would have their wars and everything else, like what European did. They would have in Europe over the space of centuries. They had the German incursions, then the Slavic incursions.
you had tribes that merged together in Europe. You know, those
Sometimes.
tribes are separate here.
Well, no, they didn't. The Anglo-Saxons stayed in England, and they took over from the Celts.
But the Angles and the
Franks took over France and imposed themselves on the Celtic Latin population there. So it isn't, and Spain should actually be three different countries, or two different, Catalonia and Castile, but it's two.
Three.
What's the third one?
Granada.
Just as a city?
No, the area of Granada, I forget what the original, it was, you know, when.
But they don't have an independence movement going.
No, they don't have an independence movement because remember the Moors were wiped out. That was the
no, they were pushed out basically anyway, or forced to convert. But anyway, we're going way off topic here. The idea here is to put a spotlight on Kenya and what's happening there.
Yeah.
And although Kenya looked as if it was going to be a prosperous developing nation, they are finding themselves right back into growing pains, a big time growing pains. And the universal problem in Africa is corruption. It is called the African disease. And we talk about corruption in Russia and Ukraine. I think Russia and Ukraine are, well, kind of much more sophisticated corruption, I think, because they're locked in with oligarchies. I think it's a tribal thing when it comes to tribal and clan thing when it comes to corruption in Africa.
Yeah. Okay, so moving on. Oh, okay. Moving on. Okay, fines have been levied across Niagara Falls after a vacation rental blitz this weekend. And not surprising in a way, if you think about it. We've just had the Canada Day weekend. We've just had the July 4th weekend. Of course, all of these places will be up and running.
Well, the thing is, the city has looked like a toothless tiger when it comes to Airbnbs. And they keep going on, and people keep complaining. They've been complaining for 5-10 years about them. The ones they mostly complain about are the ones where there is not an occupant in the house.
Yeah, that's the ones they're cracking down on. That's the ones they're cracking down on. The illegal vacation rentals, if they've been up on, so it's the vacation rentals rather than bed and breakfast type properties that they're clamping down on.
Well, they call it the Airbnbs, but it's not the same kind of Airbnb where you have an occupant.
Airbnb is they always use this name Airbnb when it's wrong. Airbnb is a promotion platform, nothing else. Right.
Yes, I know, but Kleenex was just a brand of yes, but Kleenex was just a brand of tissue, but everybody calls them Kleenexes. Yeah. So it is the name by which people have adopted to call those places Airbnb type. So the Airbnb, those vacation rentals that are residences that are rented in places where they're not allowed to be, for that to happen, is what is the biggest complaint among rental properties here or vacation properties in Niagara. We've heard for years how people have bummed out that there's a house, 18 young people get there. This is like a small bungalow, but 18 people go there. They party all night long, ripping up and down the streets. And the city has not been able to do anything about it. But they've turned that now. They have hit a blitz, and they've hit over 24 administrative. They've issued 24 what is called administrative monetary penalties, which is their new. It's called AMPS, which is their new way of dealing with this. This will these are penalties and fines they can put out there to
AMPS
avoid writing tickets and going to court.
AMPS is a bad system, by the way. AMPS is basically, it's an automated payment system. Cities are loving because it basically means they get a ton of money in, but it's a bad system because it basically doesn't do anything about proof of guilt.
Also, what do you do with the taxes? Obviously, like the hotels are complaining and the motels and Airbnbs are complaining because there are taxes levied against them. These places, are there any taxes levied against them? They can advertise their place for rental and make some money off, and who's going to come collect the taxes for having a rental property?
Well, the interesting thing is,
rental.
of course, the interesting thing is, of course, about, you just asked that question. Let me answer that question. Who collects the taxes? A municipal accommodation tax is collected on every person who stays in Niagara, whether it's a valid or invalid Airbnb. And who is it paid to? It is paid to the what do you call it? The tourism authority, the hotels and tourist board.
Well, are they tracking down the people that are staying in these illegal places?
Actually,
these places are being rented in places that they're not allowed to.
Yeah. Well, actually, the interesting thing is whether the owner of the property is got a license or not. Airbnb doesn't care. They collect the tax and they provide it to the city.
Okay, so people can, but they have to do it through the Airbnb one. But what about privately? So privately, I put out
That's
this
a
thing.
That's a different matter. I don't know. That you're supposed to collect, but and you're supposed to remit that to the city.
Well, why would you do that if you know the city doesn't approve of you being there?
Exactly.
That will tell you, okay, here's my address. Come and get me.
Yeah.
Now, Angela said that AMPS is a crazy system.
It is. It is because there's an assumption of guilt, and it breaks our whole system of law where there's an assumption of innocence.
Well, wait a minute. I can get a traffic ticket. That's an assumption of guilt.
No, you can fight your traffic ticket.
Well, can't these people fight this? Well, they can fight this. I read about AMPS. They can fight
an AMPS system. You cannot fight AMPS.
Well, according to the article I read about when they were bringing this in, saying that they could once the AMPS system, you could
no, you can ask for
dispute the AMPS system and then move it to court.
No, you can ask for a screening. You can ask for a screening, which is basically a tribunal run by the city. And do you have a problem with that? It's a fine levied by the city and the tribunals imposed by the city, put in place by the city. I have a problem with that. Natural justice should be screaming out loud and clear. There's a problem there. If you want to levy a fine, I have no problems about people levying fines, but what you've got to do is actually, you don't put it on AMPS. You've got to prove the system, prove it through the system.
Well, then, is it democratic? Should it even be there?
AMPS is not democratic.
Well, look here. So, no, that's what I'm saying. Is it democratic? So that's my question, not my reply. It's not an affirmative. It's so the way I understood it was that you can eventually take it to court. No. Dave, you are guilty, but you can argue about the fine. Oh, okay. So I'm always going to be guilty.
What that whole point is, yes, that's the way AMPS operates. And here's the thing, by the way, Dave, you've just been fined $1,000 because you've got an illegal Airbnb. So here's your $1,000. The notice comes on the board, and what you do, what many people do, you go, tear the notice down, throw it in the drawer, and do nothing about it for a month, right? You've already passed your screening date. You actually have to apply for screening within 14 days with many of these type of AMP systems.
Okay.
I don't know about.
Well, what about the old system? You got to go to court, and that bogs up court. That was the reason for getting apps, is because if they found it incredibly difficult to enforce the law going through the court system, because the courts are, of course, circumlocution deities that rather get nothing done than do things in quarters rather than halves.
Yeah, but the whole point is
you've been in court. I mean, this is my impression of court. Anytime I've been to court, I've gone to court, my impression of court is, I really don't want to do anything. The judge comes in here, I really want to do anything. Get over this quick so I can go on a recess. And all the lawyers are, we don't want to do anything today either. So can we have can we not deal with this today? It seems every time
there is an element of that, that's for sure. But remember, what you don't see, Dave, is that when we're going into court and things like that, if there's a delay, I've already spoken with the prosecutor, right? If I'm representing you and there's a delay in your case, it's because I've already spoken with the prosecutor. One of us are not ready for it, or we're negotiating a position right now, and maybe you've got a $10,000 fine that I'm negotiating down to $1,000, right? Maybe we're mid-negotiation on that fine, right? So that would be, of course, reason for delay. And the justices of the peace don't always accept delay. They might actually, they have the power to actually say, no, let's get on with it now.
Yeah, I had a buddy that was justice of the peace.
Yeah. Okay. So is it democratic to make housing costs so unreachable? That's a fair question, Mike. But the two are not, the two are not necessarily intricately lined together. I mean, when I'm talking about the two, I'm not talking about what you're saying about the Airbnbs. I'm talking about the court system and the AMPS fine system, right? I think most people in the legal profession do not like the AMPS fine system because the automatic fines can rack up. I had a client came to me. They'd already had $20,000 worth of fines before they walked in the door. It's not an Airbnb. It was something else. It was they were a landlord, and their tenant had basically left had junk all over the place, so it was in breach of their clean yards policy, and they had $20,000 worth of fines for something they had not done.
Yes, well, in any case, I'll you guys are in the legal profession, so I'll take your word for it that AMPS is kind of crazy, but as far as the city's concerned, it speeds things up for them. So I don't think they're going to change that anytime soon. It'll probably take some severe challenges, but the fact of the matter is the city was emboldened to do what they have been they have been asked to do for at least 4 or 5 years. Just about as long as we've had this show, people have been complaining about unattended Airbnbs in neighborhoods where they should not be.
Well, it's the unattended ones that are the problem, not the attended bed and the ones that have got people living in them. Yeah.
Well, they haven't gone after. There's certain areas where those are permitted, and certain areas where they're not. They could have gone after the Airbnbs where there's an occupant in areas where they're not permitted, but they don't want to do that at this time. They haven't formed a strategy or found a way in which to deal with that aspect of it, because of course the owner occupied Airbnb or vacation rental you're not going to get your big splashy parties kind of thing
Yeah.
that upsets the neighborhoods.
Exactly, because you're not going to.
It is an infringement on those people who have hotels and motels who think that's unfair competition.
But again, let's be honest about it. If you were to put up if you were to put up somebody in your spare room every once in a while, don't tell me that hasn't been going on for 200 years. All right, I will tell you.
Yeah, but it's different. It's different. It really is different.
I know it's different.
Nothing of that would have upset the hoteliers like the vacation rentals have, because they put out the biggest taxes. They're the biggest employers, and yet yet these private places are taking advantage of that. They're not paying as much taxes, blah 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 blah, and of course they're going to put up resistance because they're a business and they see some business moving away from them. They want to stop the trend, of course, but if they want to stop the trend, reduce their prices.
Well, yeah, at the end of the day, you're not going to stop. This type of business has gone on for years, right?
But it's never really been that much of an issue. It is now.
Yeah, but you wind the clock.
Because more people are engaged in it.
Yeah, you wind the clock back 50 years. Somebody would walk up to the newsagent, or to the corner store and say, "Hey, do you know about anybody who's renting out rooms?" And you go, "Yeah, Mrs. Smith at number 42."
Yeah, well, for instance, let's say I had a house and I rented vacation rentals, and I just told everybody they were my cousins. And 80 cousins later, somebody gets suspicious. He's got an awful big family, and it looks like he's got a family from India, a family from Nairobi, a family from Buenos Aires, and a family from Mexico City. And you know what I mean? So so I'm very glad that 80 of your cousins came to visit this summer. But I noticed also they left, gifts for you every time they left in the way of a stack of coin.
Yeah. But again, it's not something that's new anyway. It's been going on forever. All right. Okay. So in terms of, they basically are trying to say the compliance needs to be taken seriously. But again, note this, that enforcement came just ahead of a licensing freeze, which will put a pause on new vacation rental applications.
Yeah, well, we'll find out about that. This is something the city's been struggling with, as we've known. So there's been off and on battles. The bylaw has been fairly toothless, but with this AMPS thing, I think they figure they have more confidence to go out there and hit them up. But on the other hand, as you said, the AMP system there's problematic. Now, Betty Soom says, to make life unbearable to live is a positive mental breakdown. To steal homes because of tax they put so high they cannot afford it. Well, that's a big issue. That definitely, and part of the problem with the sort of Airbnbs or vacation rentals that don't have an occupant in them is they've bought that property and they're using and they're renting it out to pay their mortgage. They're holding on to the land, which pushed up the prices for everyone else.
Yeah. And the ones who are the people who got empty properties, that could rent them out in the normal rental market, they're certainly impacting the rental market and the high cost of rentals. It's that people who rent out their spare room are doing nothing to impact to negatively impact anything. rental wise, because you wouldn't rent that spare room out to a renter.
I don't know, but anyway,
Yeah.
So that was the issue there.
Yeah.
And they did a blitz, and they finally did something which would probably make a lot of people happy in the city, because, as you know, as we go through year after year, these complaints keep continuing up. And if you look at the agenda of the city council, year after year, this keeps coming up. And the fact that they don't seem to be able to do anything. And in one article, I think when the city bylaw went after someone, they couldn't really do much about it. Like, they were kind of stymied in what next to do, because the people didn't comply and they didn't know what else to do.
I got an answer for you, Betty, about why a home's left empty. There has been a rash, particularly in Ontario, of homes that have been left with $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 worth of damage, and you come back after a renter's been there, and a lot of people have been turned off by the rental market, which seems to overly protect the tenant more than the landlord. Not entirely true, but there's a public perception out there that occurs. The trouble is, of course, that then leads to people saying, well, actually, why would I rent my place out? I'd be better off leaving it empty for 5 years.
Yeah. And it must be noted, too, that 95% of renters and landlords are okay. Like, most of the renters pay their rent. Most of the landlords oblige the law.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Exactly. And we're only talking about a small percentage, probably less than 1% of the entire population.
Well, also, it's people who buy places and then rent them out, but don't do the homework they need to be done. So they get themselves a tenant, and then they can't get rid of them. And the tenant, they could have screened the tenant. When I had a rental place, I screened everyone that came in to rent. I put them through a credit check. And a credit check is very, very revealing. Poor people who pay their bills are better off than rich people that don't. Believe me. If you have a person that's on mother's allowance or something like that, a single mom, I had a couple single moms in my places, they paid their rent, right? But you get other people that come in and they might not pay their rent. And so if you put them through a credit check, no matter what they look like, you put them through a credit check, and that's it. That will tell you 80% of what you needed to know.
And not always. Not always.
No, look, I'm telling you, it worked for me. That was the number one thing. I'm saying 80%, not all. Because if you find somebody that's paying their bills on time, you've got a
real bad credit record, but yet pay their rent on time all the time, every time.
Possible, but unlikely. Extremely unlikely.
I'm going to argue with you because I think it's possible. I know of people.
I know it's possible, but it's unlikely.
We have people.
I said unlikely. You'd have to know that person well. It's been my experience and many others people's experience. If you do have a bad credit rating, you're going to be a leech. Very more likely than not. You might not be, but if you are
people, you see, part and parcel of the problem is if you go to many landlords.
I'm talking about statistics. You're talking about individuals. I know a guy.
I'm talking statistics.
Well, sure, I know a guy too.
I'm talking statistics as well. Many landlords do not report paying tenants through the Landlord Credit Bureau. That basically negatively impacts the tenant who's actually paying their rent all the time, because they're not reported onto the Landlord Credit Bureau. The Landlord Credit Bureau is an important step. If you are a landlord and you have tenants, put them on the Landlord Credit Bureau.
Well, you're talking about isolated cases. Yeah, sure. Certain exceptions are there, but overall, overall, if somebody cannot pay their debts or have a lot of debts, they're going to be a problem. If they have a history of not being able to pay their debts, they are more likely going to be a problem tenant than someone that isn't. That's just it. That's just the truth.
I know, but I'm just also saying that because landlords don't put their tenants on the landlord credit bureau, they don't help them improve their rentals, their credit rating.
Well, I rented a place. I know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I also know that the landlord credit. Do you know about the landlord credit bureau?
I've heard about it from Maria Recruit.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's a lot of landlords that don't put their. It makes
How many?
it bad.
How many?
A lot.
How many? You say a lot. A lot. What percentage? What percentage?
I can't tell you a percentage, but
okay, yeah. So some. So basically, you're going to some. Some.
I can tell you. No, I can tell you assertively the numbers of. We have millions of tenants in Ontario. We have a few thousand tenants that are put on the landlord credit bureau. Is all.
Well, what is the landlord credit? What is the obligations of it? Like obviously the landlord credit thing has come up as a tool that landlords use. But if not all landlords want to use it, well then what good is it?
The bigger landlords don't give a shit about using that credit bureau.
So they don't need that credit bureau, but they will need to know your credit. And if you are a large or small renter, that is your number one line of defense.
Anyway,
check out their credit rating.
Let's move on very quickly.
And that's beyond paying rent. That is other things too. How much are their credit cards overrun? Yeah. How many bills have they not paid?
Yeah.
Et cetera.
Let's go on to these because this has got to be put out there. 2 public beaches are currently unsafe for swimming in Niagara. And these ones are Charles Daly Park and Shirkston Quarry. And they've had high E. coli exposure.
Shirkston Quarry, everyone. Shirkston Quarry. So it's not Shirkston Beach, not the lake part, just the quarry part. So that when I first read that, I thought, oh God, Shirkston, there's so many people living in trailers there. And then I looked at, oh yeah, it's the quarry. Well, yeah, the quarry is an independent body of water that when they did a quarry there, water flooded into it, and it's been there ever since. So it's a little lake almost, but that is full of E. coli. Well, you can imagine that it's a small body of water with a lot of people in it, so things can get out of hand. But the lakeside is still okay. If you want to take your kids there, you can go to the beach there, and the Charles Daly Park. That's the only other one. Just about everything else is okay, though.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, everything else is okay. I'm just putting them out as warning because we do that on this show.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, and I think we can kind of call it quits at that point.
Yeah. Anyway, without further ado,
in our lakes are getting to the extreme. Yeah, to be extreme. Well,
that happens because of storm runoffs. It's not always our fault on this side of the river, but I think it's communities all over. Their storm sewers overrun at times when we have a lot of water, flood water, or rainwater, or so on, and we still have a lot of work separating our sewers in this city, and probably they have as well in Niagara Falls, New York. At least in Niagara Falls, New York, they don't have that. They had one big sewer pipe pouring into the water right beside the American Falls. I remember that years ago. And it was just a big complaint because the sewage came right out of the side of the gorge, right near the bottom of the gorge. It would just spew out this
I don't
affluent.
think they do that anymore, though, do they?
No, they don't. No, it
recall
used to be. It
something,
used to be such an eyesore, and a sewage pipe just dumping, and it would be all foamy and brown and gross,
Yeah.
But they don't do that anymore.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
But it doesn't mean that effluent of some kind of getting into the lake through the non-separation of sewers. And plus, you got your own, our own sewage treatment plant here. That when it becomes overloaded, where the sewage goes right into the canal. I think that Mike Cushman told me that.
Just to let everybody know, rain basically in an hour.
Yeah. Okay, everyone. Don't wash your car.
Or do.
Well, let the rain get at it first.
Yeah, but then you'll have to wash it
after.
anyway.
Yeah.
Then you'll have to wash it anyway.
Yeah.
All right. Well, have a great day, everybody. And Dave?
Without further ado, don't forget Gaza. It is a nightmare there. And the West is really failing bad. If you ever thought that the world was going in the right direction, look at Gaza and think, boy, we really do have to adjust our abilities to protect the people of the world.
Yeah. Bye.